Wonderful. Well, first of all, welcome to our webinar today, Organic 101 for Extension Agents, Understanding Certification Standards and Producer Journeys. This webinar is one in a series, thanks to a Southern SARE producer grant. So we're happy to be here and share what we know with technical service providers about Organic 101. This is, again, a project of Southern SARE in partnership with Florida Organic Growers and our organization, the Organic Farming Research Foundation. Next slide, please. So today we're going to have a wonderful presentation followed by a panel discussion. So please stay tuned for that discussion. I'll introduce our panelists after the presentation. Today, our presenter is Rebecca Champagne, the conservation scientist here with the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I, Mary Hathaway, I am the Research and Education Program Manager, and I will be your moderator today. Next slide, please. Before we get going, I just want to give a quick introduction to the Organic Farming Research Foundation, our organization. We are a national nonprofit founded in 1990 to advance organic agriculture through scientific research. And we do that through fostering the widespread adoption and improvement of organic farming systems. Our work is kind of in three main arenas. Research is really core to what we do, and it's always kind of our start. So we make sure that there is funding for organic research. We make sure that the research then is available for all of our great education that's available. So we create fact sheets, webinars like this, host field days, etc., all based on the cutting edge organic research that's out there and making sure that it's all accessible and applicable for organic farmers and ranchers. I'll plug that you can find a host of things free on our website, ofrf.org. I would also love to plug our hub, our Organic Research Hub, where you can search by commodity, by region, by topic of interest, all sorts of keywords, and find what sort of organic research is out there for you. So please give it a check out. And finally, our other arena is advocacy. We make sure, and we are pivotal, making sure that there is federal funding for the things that organic farmers and researchers need, especially making sure that the voices of farmers are heard on Capitol Hill. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Rebecca to take it away.
Thank you, Mary. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here today. So like Mary said, we're going to spend about the first half of the webinar covering some of the basics of organic, some organic myths, some labeling information, and National Organic Program regulations. So this is really meant to give you a high-level overview of these things. It would probably take a whole webinar in itself of just me talking about the National Organic Program. So like I said, this will be pretty high level. And as we go, Mary will be dropping some resource links into the chat that correspond with some of the slides. So as we go, feel free to drop any questions that you have into the chat. We'll do our best to answer them as we go, and we'll also have time at the end during that panel discussion. So if you have questions specifically for those panelists, if you could just try to hold dropping those in the chat until we get to that panel discussion so we don't lose track of them. So yeah, we will get right into it. So we're first going to cover a little bit about organic and the NOP and some compliance basics. So at its core, organic really encompasses a systems approach that emphasizes healthy soil, healthy plants, people, and overall the environment. So organic aims to really mimic those ecological and biological processes and focuses on soil health and biodiversity. So when you have that USDA certified organic label, it means that the product has been produced in compliance with the USDA's National Organic Program standards and regulations, some of those which we will get into later on. And we also are dropping in a little bit about organic into the chat. So like I said, the National Organic Program, this is often referred to as the NOP. This is the USDA's federal regulatory program for organically produced products in the US. And the NOP has several duties. One of them is to develop and enforce the organic standards that are used for crops, livestock, as well as handling of products and imports. They also investigate any complaints of organic regulation violations, and they manage the Organic Integrity Database. This houses all information on certified operations in the country, and that is a searchable database that anybody can go into. If a farm has certification, their information will be listed in there, as well as where they're located, the crops they produce, things like that. So lastly, the NOP also uses input from the National Organic Standards Board, the NOSB. Lots of acronyms, so I'll do my best to define them all as I go. So the NOSB helps inform the standards that are used by the National Organic Program and those regulations that farmers are adhering to. So we know that the certifiers are the ones that go to the farm and they check the farm out and they do the actual certification issuing. The NOP is in charge of accrediting those organic certifiers. So the certifiers, if they identify any sort of violation of the NOP, the certifier should report it to the NOP. And then the NOP goes and investigates any of those reports. So to help kind of minimize fraud in the organic chain, the strengthening organic enforcement rule was implemented a couple years ago to make sure that all of these regulations are being followed. And then additionally, the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, or AMS, they designed what they call a penalty matrix. This is used to investigate complaints. They can be classified as minor or major. You could think of a minor violation being something like you had a lapse in some sort of documentation you were supposed to do and you just simply forgot about it, and it's something that is easily fixed. That might be a minor violation, and you're going to keep your certification though. However, a major violation would be if you deliberately used a prohibited substance in your organic production or you falsified records. This is more often than not going to be a revocation of your certification. So there are lots of things that farmers have to follow in order to meet all these requirements. And before we get into that, I wanted to give a little bit of a regional overview. So we are doing this work in conjunction with Southern SARE, and I want to give a little bit of context about what agriculture looks like in this region. So the Southern SARE region includes 13 states, plus Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So these numbers are from the 2021 USDA Organic Census. And they did mail out the 2025 census at the end of the year. That data is not available yet. So these are the most up-to-date numbers that we currently have. This is from the 2021 survey. So in that year, the Southern SARE region had just under 1,500 certified farms that were encompassing a little over 425,000 acres, which is awesome. And this region was generating $1.5 billion US dollars in sales across all organic products. So here's a nice snapshot of those values. It's broken out by state. And I'm definitely anticipating that some of these numbers will be going up because the organic industry as a whole has grown about 5% over the last year. That's according to the organic market data that the National Organic Coalition recently released. But yeah, the Southern SARE region is definitely a really good piece of the whole organic sector in the country. So in 2022, us at OFRF published the National Organic Research Agenda. This surveyed over 1,000 organic farmers around the country and really gave us a lot of insight on the challenges that farmers in different regions were facing and some of the priority areas for research and policy. So if we looked at that data and pulled out some information from the Southern SARE region, so farmers in this region were identifying challenges related to drought and then managing irrigation and water resources during those times of drought. Also the need for more farm labor and markets for the organic products. They know that they can grow a lot of different crops, a lot of specialty crops, but they need markets for them as well. So that's been a challenge. And then they identified just overall the challenges that come with operating a farm business. So they also identified some particular technical assistance needs. So any technical assistance providers on the call, the farmers in this region are really looking for assistance related to variability in weather and weather extremes, as well as weed, pest, and disease management, soil fertility and soil health, and then also, interestingly, access to certified organic seed. So we'll get into a little bit about that organic seed rule in the National Organic Program. Briefly, I'll just mention that organic farmers, they can use a non-organic seed if it is untreated, if it's non-GMO and it is untreated, but they have to show that a certified organic option was not available on the market for them. So that access to certified organic seed for some of the specialty crops was harder for some farmers in this region. Okay, so now we will go over some of the basics of the certification process and the record keeping that farmers have to do. So the general rule for transitioning land to organic production is to manage that land by the NOP standards for a minimum of 36 months with no prohibited substances. So this can include non-organic pesticides, the synthetic fertilizers, and then GMO and treated seeds. And the Organic Materials Review Institute, which is referred to as OMRI, has a really comprehensive list of allowed and prohibited substances. They have a searchable list in the website, which Mary just dropped into the chat. This is a really great resource if you need to just really quickly check if something is allowed or not. But I will mention that this timeline for transitioning land can vary. It depends on the date of application of a prohibited substance. So let's say someone bought a farm and that land had never, well, they bought some land, but it had never been farmed. If they can prove that no prohibited substances have been applied in the last 36 months, they would be eligible for certification right away. But let's say there's part of your farm that you've been growing corn on and you applied a herbicide in June of 2025. You would have to follow that 36-month rule starting from the date of that herbicide application. So in general, it's that 36 months. It just depends on when a prohibited substance was last applied. So the rules for transitioning livestock will vary by species, which before I get into that, I will just mention some of the general rules that apply to all livestock for the certification process. They must be fed an organic diet. They cannot receive antibiotics or growth hormones. And they must always have access to the outdoors. And we'll get into some of those specifics coming up pertaining to pasture and dry matter intake, things like that. But for the species specifics, milk animals must be under organic management for 1 year before their products can be certified and sold as organic. For animals that are raised for meat and fiber, this organic production timeline must start in the last third of the mother's gestational period, or earlier if possible. That way, when they are born and they are starting to be raised for meat or fiber, that they've already followed that process. And then lastly, for poultry, this starts the second day of the chick's life. This allows organic producers to buy chicks from other hatcheries, and then starting on their second day of life, they can start them on that organic management going forward. So although what we are talking about today refers to the actual production side of things, I did want to mention that there are some differences in certification for processing versus handling. So if the farmer is marketing their raw goods directly to a consumer, to a restaurant, or to a retail space, if they're just washing the veggies, bringing them to the farmer's market, selling them at their farm stand, at their farm, they just need the producer certification, which are all the details that we are covering today. But if the farmer themselves is doing any sort of processing of those products, they also require a handling certification. On the other hand, if they are sending their products to a facility that is doing that handling, that facility is the one that needs that handling certification. So some examples of any of this processing would be if they are slaughtering animals, pasteurizing milk, grinding whole corn into a cornmeal product, pressing fresh apples for cider. Excuse me, these are all examples of things that if a farmer were doing them on their own on their farm, they would also need that handling certification. We will not be covering the specifics of that, but it's a really good thing to kind of understand the difference between the two. So for the producer certification, the certifying body or agency that the farmer goes with is going to follow a certain set of steps for the initial certification, and then they will cover other steps annually thereafter to continue that certification if the farmer chooses to continue annually. So this will involve the farmer, like I said, using these organic practices for that 36 months, submitting an application to the certifying agency. They will then come out to the farm, they will inspect it to make sure it is meeting the organic requirements, and then they will choose if the certification can be issued or not. If it is issued, the farmer must document all their activities, which are reviewed on an annual basis thereafter, before the certifier reissues that certification. So there's a lot of record keeping involved. The farmer's going to keep lots of different detailed records to show the certifier each year. This is just a snapshot of some of them. So these documentation forms are available online through the USDA. We have talked to farmers that use their own, but they include all the same information that the USDA is requiring. Some people just like to make their own Google Sheets and things that they can bring out into the field. We talked to a farmer once who had an iPad, and as she was out in the field or in the greenhouse working on things, she could update things in her records in real time. Some people prefer the classic pen and paper and having paper records, as long as all the information that is needed for the certifier is there. So some of these records, they include the history of the field, an activity log for each field, so what's going on in that field on a day-to-day basis, or whenever some sort of activity happens in the field, a planting and harvesting record, manure application, both where it came from, and the rate at which it was applied, when it was applied, how it was incorporated, seed sources. So when I was working on a farm, we always saved the label that came on the outside of the seed bag. Same with bags of fertilizer that we bought. We'd always cut out that label and keep it as part of our records. So if we need to look at like a specific lot number for the seeds, we had all that information right there, which also had the seed company or fertilizer company name and contact info on it. They also require sales records for each product and then overall total farm sales. I will note too that if it's a split operation, which can be pretty common, meaning that out of the entire farm, only part of it might be certified and part of it might still be under conventional or maybe just not certified. There have to be records for equipment cleaning. If the farmer is using the same equipment on the organic and the non-organic parts of the farm, which I think probably most farmers are, you're probably not going to have a separate tractor and cultivator and etc. for two different parts of the farm. So a lot of farmers are going to be using that equipment, if they can, in the organic side of the farm first, and then going to the non-organic side. But if it has to be the other way around, there are requirements for cleaning that equipment before it can enter into an organic certified area of a farm. Okay, so that was a really quick rundown on certification and record keeping basics. So now we're going to look at some certified labels, organic and others, versus non-certified labels, kind of clear up some information there, as well as a few common myths about organic production. So what does the organic label actually mean? I mean, I've heard people in the grocery store, even friends of mine say before, well, organic doesn't mean anything. But organic is following USDA standards. It's a verifiable legal standard. So in order for something to even have that certified organic label on it, it has to contain 95% organic ingredients. Probably wondering why not 100%? So that up to 5%, they can be something that is considered a non-organic product, but it is approved for use on that national list of allowed or prohibited substances, that OMRI list that we dropped in the chat earlier. Good example, plastic mulch. Plastic mulch is used a lot in organic production in those raised bed systems. Plastic is not an organic material. It's made from petroleum, but it is approved for use in organic production. Another example, using pheromones for insect management. Pheromones are not considered an organic product, but they are approved for use because they are a better alternative to chemical insecticides. So that's where that up to 5% comes in. And that's what permits the use of the actual certified organic label that you see on the top there. But similar to this USDA certified organic is the term made with organic blank. So these are products that contain at least 70% organic ingredients, but they cannot use that USDA organic seal. On their ingredient list, they do have to identify which ingredients are organic, but they are not meeting, they're meeting somewhere between 70 to 94%, but they are not meeting that 95% that would permit the use of the seal. But they do have to denote which products in the ingredient list are coming from an organic source. So there's a lot of labels out there. We thought it would be good to just give a brief rundown on some of them and where some of these differences are to maybe clear up any sort of confusion. So on the left here are labels that require some sort of agency's certification. But on the right are others that are not certified and can just be used by a company really for marketing. So for example, Fair Trade, American Grass-Fed, the Non-GMO Project, and American Humane. These are all separate from the USDA certified organic label, but they require certification by the agencies that run these labels. But on the other hand, you've probably seen terms like raised without antibiotics, hormone-free, free-range, natural, really big buzzword. These do not require a certification to use them on the packaging of a product. So unfortunately, this can confuse a lot of consumers. So we thought it was important today to just give a quick example of some things that are certified versus not. Okay, so we try to think of a few things that we commonly hear about organic and maybe what is true and what isn't. And if you've heard anything in particular about organic that is maybe a myth or you'd like clarification on, feel free to drop it in the chat. So that sometimes we hear from people is that organic farming, it's like, no, the conventional farms are just ones that are really large scale. Organic farms are smaller scale, maybe they're only in urban areas. But, and I can give some examples here, yeah, there are a lot of small scale and urban producers in the organic world. But there's also a lot of really large organic farms, thousands of acres in size. And that USDA certification and regulations are going to apply to all farm scales and locations equally. We talked to one organic farmer who is growing in a city, and she has half an acre that's certified. We've talked to farmers who have 10 acres, some who have a couple hundred. And then we've also talked to a farmer in the Plains region up near Canada who has 10,000 acres. So organic is really, it's all across the board. And those certifications and the regulations are going to apply equally to all of those farm sizes and all of those locations. So the next one is something we hear a lot. Organic farming doesn't use pesticides. So the fact is that organic farming does use them, but they are National Organic Program approved substances. They are non-synthetic pesticides, so you're not using Roundup, you're not using glyphosate, not using paraquat. They should only be used as a last resort for pest management, really. They exist to help out a pest management program, but organic farmers are using a lot of other different practices to manage pests. But these are, like I said, these are approved by the National Organic Program. They are non-synthetic pesticides. Some examples of these would be neem oil, pyrethrin, diatomaceous earth, and plant essential oils. And things like this are searchable in that OMRI database as well. So the other myth that we hear a lot is that organic farming yields and profit are much, much lower than conventional. And I think that's used a lot as an argument to why organic can't be successful, but it really can. There are farmers who will see if they're going from conventional straight into that 3-year transition period into organic. It's common to see a decline in productivity during that 3-year transition, really getting the hang of those organic practices. And not relying on synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. But once a farmer has really refined that system and gotten used to those organic practices, their yields and their profits can match or sometimes even exceed. Oops, didn't advance it. Sorry. Can often, match or sometimes exceed those of conventional operations. It's really the long-term benefits to soil health and biodiversity that are seen, along with that increased resilience to weather variability over the longer terms, is really going to help lower input costs and increase that resiliency of the operation. Okay, now we're going to get into some rules. Like I said, this is going to be more of like a high-level overview of the National Organic Program and what it requires for organic producers. If you would like more in-depth information on a particular regulation, feel free to check out the NOP website or feel free to email me. We'll have my email on the screen at the end of the presentation, but I'm happy to dig into any of these regulations for you if you have a follow-up question later on. So we already touched on the basics of the organic land requirements and some of those land use examples for that transition period. So I did want to highlight that the National Organic Program also requires some defined boundaries or buffer zones, so it's clear that a field is under organic management. This really prevents the unintended application of a substance that shouldn't be used that would cause a loss of certification. Some of the farms that I've worked on before have part of the farm that is certified and part that is not. These areas of the farm are separate. They are not 2 fields right next to each other. But even then, the organic part of the farm always had a sign up that said that it was an organic area and that no pesticides could be applied. So something that was there to indicate to somebody who maybe isn't familiar with the farm where the organic side of the farm was. Okay. So organic producers also really need to place emphasis on soil health and nutrient management. So you'll see at the top of all of these slides, it's going to be a statute in the National Organic Program. So if you end up going to their website and into the handbook and you want to search, that's what those the series of numbers are at the top. That's specific to the content in each of these slides. So like I said, they really put an emphasis on soil health and nutrient management. And this is done through, they do use tillage and cultivation, but they must do so in a way that is either maintaining or improving soil conditions and minimizing erosion. So this can be done through reducing the frequency or the intensity of soil disturbance. So maybe not relying so heavily on primary tillage through the use of a moldboard plow, perhaps using things like a chisel plow or a harrow, or reducing just the frequency. So tillage to prepare the seed bed, but then cover cropping to help reduce the frequency of the soil disturbance that is happening over the course of the crop rotation. So farmers must also manage nutrients and fertility through a number of things. So they have to use crop rotation, cover crops, and then the fertilizers have to come from plant or animal materials. So the goal is to really maintain or improve the soil organic matter and think of ways to reduce the erosion and reduce any sort of contamination that can occur with crops and soils and waters. Okay, so I had already mentioned briefly about the seeds, but we'll go a little bit more in depth here. So the NOP does require the use of organic certified seeds, seedlings, planting stock. The exception is that they can use a non-organic but untreated seed if an organic certified equivalent is not commercially available. And they have to show the certifier that is the case. So this rule also specifies that seeds, seedlings, and planting stock, they can first be treated with a non-organic substance and then used to produce an organic crop, but only if the application of that substance is required for federal or state phytosanitary regulations. So it's mostly the case for like treating an imported product if there's a concern for animal, plant, or human health. I don't know of a lot of cases of that, but it is written into the NOP if it needs to be used. So the NOP really stresses using as diverse of a crop rotation as a farmer can where it is possible. So along with planting their cash crops, this can include a sod crop, a cover crop, green manures, or a catch crop. The goal is to have these more diverse rotations to, help with the organic matter in the soil, to manage pests or disrupt their life cycles, to help with soil erosion, and then managing either a deficient or an excess nutrient. So without the use of synthetic pesticides, organic producers really have to rely on a suite of strategies to manage weeds, insects, and diseases. No real like silver bullet approach, as you'd call it. They have to use a lot of different strategies together. So the NOP outlines the use of crop rotation. So rotating through crops that may not be a host plant for a pest, for example, or using a crop that maybe is more of a deterrent to one. Also, the proper selection of crop species and varieties. There are some out there in the organic market that might be more resistant to pests and diseases. Not resistant in the way that like a GMO crop is, but resistant in just that it might have more of a competitive advantage or like some sort of growth habit or just not preferred as much by pests. And that's done through, more traditional plant breeding and not through like a GMO process. So thinking about what kind of plant varieties or cultivars are out there is a good choice. But also thinking about habitat for the natural enemies of pests and biological controls. Then for weeds, farmers are using practices like mulching, grazing, flame weeding, mowing, and then sanitation measures, removing the disease vector, managing the spread of weed seed. That's a really big one. Organic farmers tend to have a lot of weeds. And managing them when they are small before they have the chance to produce seeds is considered a sanitation measure because you are going to greatly reduce the number of seeds that are actually being shed back into the soil. And then also removing any sort of pest habitat that might be there. Okay, so we covered a little bit of the basics of livestock. I'll reiterate some of that. Like I said, livestock that are sold or labeled as organic, they have to be under that continuous organic management from the last third of the mother gestational period. That's for the meat or the fiber animals. For the dairy animals, it's for at least 12 months before the milk products can be sold as organic. And then for poultry, that timeline starts the second day of life. There are some things that are specifically prohibited in livestock production. If an animal is removed from an organic operation and then managed on a non-organic one, they cannot then be sold, labeled, or represented as organic because they were previously under organic management. The same goes for if an animal is treated with, let's say, an antibiotic because that is what was the best option for the sick animal, they can no longer be marketed or sold as organic after that. let's see. Yeah, and so we will, oh, also mention the last point there, the OSP. I don't know if I've defined that term yet. Sorry. OSP, the Organic System Plan. If an operation has any animals that are currently in that transitional phase, it needs to be outlined in that Organic System Plan, which animals are in that transitional period. So livestock feed, they must have, it's called a full and balanced diet. So like we all should be having. Theirs is made up of pasture, forage, feed, any needed added concentrates. We won't get into specifics here because it's really going to vary by animal. But the parts of their diet must be produced and handled organically as well. Ruminant animals, they must graze for a minimum of 120 days per calendar year. But this does not have to be continuous. So if there are weather conditions going on that would either cause harm to the animal or if the animals were out grazing would end up resulting in losses to soil or water quality. It does not have to be a continuous 120 days as long as that minimum is met across the course of the calendar year. There are some states that have a higher requirement. I believe Vermont requires 150 days. So it may be different per state. And that is good to check with the certifying agencies on those specifics, but the minimum across the board is 120. And then they must receive at least 30% of their dry matter intake from grazing. I am not going to go through the calculation of that with you, but you can find that online. And there's a minimum 30% of that should come from their outdoor grazing that they are doing on their pastures. So there's also some general rules for livestock care. They should be provided what's called preventive care. One big thing that I think some people don't talk about is the selection of species. There are certain animal species that may be better adapted to certain climates, and thinking about that is important for the operation. They're going to need, like I said, sufficient feed to meet their nutritional needs, proper housing for the animal. The NOP does outline housing spacing requirements for specific animals. That, like I said, high level overview, so we're not going to cover some of those specifics, but briefly I can mention that like a broiler chicken is going to require a certain amount of square foot per bird compared to a layer. And then, of course, there's going to be differences for much larger animals as well. But there are defined square footage minimums per animal. And then that also goes hand in hand with freedom of movement. So organically raised animals are also not allowed to have physical alterations done to them. They can only be for identification purposes. So identification tag on an animal, that's a common one, but they can't do any sort of other physical alteration. So they can't perform tail docking, they can't dehorn an animal, they can't do beak trimming, for example, which are common things in those more confined operations. That is not allowed in organic. A producer's also going to need, as part of the record keeping, a parasite prevention plan that they're using. And then there are also some things I said that are specifically prohibited, antibiotics and growth hormones. But then also you can't withhold appropriate medical treatment just to preserve organic status. So if there is an animal that gets sick and it reaches the point where the only way to keep them comfortable and keep them alive is to give them something that would be considered a non-organic substance, you can't deny giving them that because you want to preserve the animal's organic status. You just have to take them out of organic production. So animal welfare is really, the goal there. So there's also some general rules for their living conditions. They have to meet, as it states broadly, they have to meet the needs of the animal's health and their natural behavior. Like I said, there's going to be indoor space requirements for species. It's going to need proper ventilation and clean water. They also need to have year-round access to the outdoors. Um, and they should also have the ability to access shade and shelter if they're going to be going in and out, or if they're out in a pasture, having some sort of structure that's going to provide that shade and shelter. They need lots of room for exercise and to get that fresh air and sunlight, and then the clean water, like I said. So the continuous confinement of animals is prohibited. There is temporary confinement allowed. There's no specific timeline that's given, but it's supposed to be as minimal as possible. So the temporary confinement would be for things like a blizzard or, hurricane. And I said blizzard because I'm from the Northeast, but I'm not having any blizzards in the South. But some sort of weather, inclement weather that's going to potentially be harmful to the animals, that then they would be allowed to be inside. Um, Health conditions, another one. If there's a sick animal and you need to keep them temporarily confined for treatment, that is allowed. Breeding. And then let's say an animal is going to a 4-H or an FFA event with the kiddos. They are allowed that temporary confinement, I guess you would call it if they're like at the fairgrounds, that's allowed. When they're being shipped around in a trailer or going, being sold somewhere, that's considered temporary confinement. That is allowed. But the overall, just the continuous confinement is what is a big no in organic. So like I mentioned, there's that, the organic system plan, and then part of that record keeping for that, they must have a pasture plan if they have animals. This has to outline how they will meet the animals' pasture requirements. So it needs to meet both the quality and the quantity of the feed for the animal. Like I said, it needs to have the areas of shade or shelter. It needs to have drinking water. And the fencing that is used, it cannot use pressure-treated wood. It's also it's important for farmers to consider in their pastures the soil fertility and the erosion control. So thinking about where is the pasture located in proximity to sloping land, to water, to a wetland, or to a riparian area. And those considerations need to be worked into the pasture plan and talked about with their certifier or extension or TSPs on like how to manage all of those resources together as one system. And the last thing I'll just briefly cover is that it's important for organic producers to implement measures that will prevent the commingling of organic and non-organic products. This is really to protect organic products from contact with prohibited substances. For example, a packaging material or a storage container that contained a synthetic preservative or a fungicide or a fumigant, those cannot be used to then store an organic product. And then if there's some sort of reusable bag or container that has been in contact with a non-organic substance, they would have to follow a cleaning protocol before it can be used to store an organic product. And then, for example, if a farmer has, like I mentioned, that split operation, they have an organic and a non-organic part of the farm, they must have these measures in place to prevent contamination of the certified part of the farm and the products that are produced from it. And then lastly, some other helpful resources, which Mary's going to drop in the chat. We just think these are some things you might find useful for learning more about organic systems and requirements. All right, Mary, I will hand it over to you. And if you'd like, I can keep my screen up just to make it easier for you.
That would make it easier for me. Thank you so much. Yes, there was a lot there. I hope everyone's still with us and like not like, oh my goodness. Now we get to go to a little more of a discussion, and I'm really excited about today's discussion because we've got 3 different experts that are going to kind of come at this organic certification from all sides. So I'm going to introduce them. I'm also going to ask for a little bit of our audience participation in terms of like sharing your challenges, sharing your questions, because we'd really like to make that sort of the centerpiece of our discussion is kind of what it is you're wondering and how we can better serve the farmers in our region. So without ado, I will introduce our wonderful 3 participants. We have Eva Worden. Eva and her husband own and operate Worden Farm, which is in Southwest Florida. It's an organic certified farm since 2003. They sell directly to the local community. They have a wonderful community supported agriculture program and sell also to farmers markets. And they've just been a powerhouse in Florida as growers for quite some time. We're so happy to have you here, Eva. We also are joined by Danielle Treadwell. Danielle Treadwell joins us from the University of Florida. She's the associate professor, and she works with Extension on organic farming. She touches Florida's food system in so many different ways, including farm to school, working with organic farmers, small diversified farmers, and really is a wonderful specialist in making sure that our extension agents can serve our organic farmers. So welcome, Danielle. We're so happy to have you here. And last but not least, we have Juan Carlos Rodriguez. He's joining us from Florida Organic Growers as the Education and Outreach Specialist. He has worn many hats. He has been a food systems researcher, a farm worker, a farmers market manager. He's helped worked as a certifier. He is an expert in fruit and vegetable greenhouse production. Right now, he's working on the Southeast Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which is a USDA funded program that's helping to assist organic farmers and farmers transitioning to organic in Florida and the Southeast in general. So we are so happy to have this series of panelists. And I'm going to have them further introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their journey into organic. But before we do, next slide, please. I want for you all, for any participants that are here, kind of as the panel is introducing and talking a little more, we'd love if you would add into the chat what challenges you have had in working with organic farmers, and are there tools you wish you had or things that would help you better support organic farmers in your community? And as you're thinking about that, please add them into the chat, and our wonderful panel will kind of use these as pieces to discuss a little bit more too. But without further ado into our panel, I'm going to say go ahead and maybe take away the share screen, Rebecca, so we can see our panelists. Great, great. And Juan Carlos, if you're able to share your to turn your video on, that we would appreciate it. But if not, I totally understand. Um, so first, I'm just going to invite you all to share a little more about how you became involved in organic agriculture, kind of what was your starting point. And Eva, I would love to start with you.
Thanks, Mary. First, can I just say I'm delighted that this is happening here today, and thank you all for joining and for your interest in organics. I came to organic farming via horticultural science graduate school. I studied it actually, I halfway through my bachelor's program in undergrad, I realized how cool horticultural sciences were. And so I began studying it then at University of Florida, got a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, and then went on to grad school in Maryland. And further, after my master's, went on for a doctorate in Connecticut at Yale and did an ecosystem management program degree where I studied some of the first community supported agriculture farms in the country and participated in the first CSA census. And at that time, Organic Farming Research Foundation was in early days. Danielle was also in graduate school at the time, Dr. Treadwell, and Florida Organic Growers was also in early days. I finished my grad school when came down for a job at University of Florida, and I was in extension. I was a state specialist in urban landscape horticulture and also taught horticulture. And then my husband was farming, and the farm got bigger and bigger. He also has degrees in horticultural sciences, and I joined in, and we have grown the farm over the last 25 years and been farming in Florida. And that grew into consulting work as well because people would ask us, like, how are you doing this? Because the South is uniquely difficult, especially for organic. When we first started actually doing organic farming, people pretty much said it couldn't be done here. And the appointment that Dr. Treadwell got, well, she can tell you more about it, but I believe it was the first position in University of Florida in the organic farming world. So yeah, we've been in it since the beginning, you could say, and really delighted to be here today and answer any questions that people might have.
Wow, what a journey. Thank you, Eva.
Thanks.
And Dr. Treadwell, we'll hand it over to you. A little introduction of how you got into organic and a bit of your journey to here.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and thanks, Rebecca, for a great presentation. And Eva, I never get tired of hearing your story, so happy to be here. I got into organic working in Asheville, North Carolina at the French Broad Food Co-op, and I was helping farmers come in the morning with their produce for sale. And it was just back in the day, so everybody was pretty granola, and it was super fun and cool. And these farmers were really, really frustrated, and they had the most beautiful produce in the entire world, and it was amazing. And they were super hardworking and very inspiring, and they had no technical support. And I was flabbergasted. Like, why don't you just call the university? I mean, I, I don't come from like an academic family or anything. I'm really the first gen college student and the whole bit. So, but I knew that there was help at the universities, and they looked at me and said, "It's not happening. We just don't have any help." So that was my inspiration. And the short version of that is that I went to grad school and studied organic production in both my master's and my PhD at NC State. Another great state that has a great diversity of commodities, a lot of different soil and weather regimes. And so my move to Florida was a logical one. I had family here, but more importantly, I think I've always figured if you can farm in Florida, you can farm anywhere. So hats off to Eva and Chris. Um, and so I'm here, and I've never looked back. I love what I do. And I'm a state extension specialist. So 65% of my duties are to develop educational materials for technical service providers. So that's agents, but also NRCS and anybody that's out there beating the street, right? And I have a very long and appreciative for the relationship that I have with FOG. And of course, Eva and I and Mary and many others, Thelma, are often have opportunities to collaborate on different things. So grateful for the community that we have here in the Southeast. There is a lot of support for all of you. So take note. That's my story.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
And last but not least, with the beautiful citrus in the background, JC, if you'd like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your journey to organic in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I echo what both Eva and Danielle were saying in terms of just our experiences. I did not grow up in a farm, even though I think they made a really wise decision to choose ag as a major. I was lucky to go, originally from Honduras, go to a particular agricultural college that is very hands-on, gives you an enormous experience into what farming really is all about. In some ways, because my dad is also a graduate of the University of Florida, also wanted to follow on those footsteps. So I knew I was going to somehow try to come to the University of Florida. Once I came and also was in the horticultural sciences department, study under a great, professor and somebody who taught me a lot about research and other things. But it was in greenhouse production, and obviously not organic. But for some reason, just in Gainesville, being connected to folks and friends, I had some friends who used to work for Florida Organic Growers, and I would volunteer often with FOG, without even thinking or really saying organic, what is this? But understood enough because it was just almost sometimes helping teach classes to kids about how to grow seedlings and that sort of thing. Once I graduated, I so happened to be working at a local organic farm. And the farmer said to me, you know, that Fog is hiring. You should go out and check it out, you know, because you've been, uh, volunteering with them, all of that. Long story short, I applied to the job, but it was as a certification reviewer. So that was on the organic certification side of things, not necessarily on the education side of things. And I always remember that the executive director at the time says, you know, we've always liked you helping us over the years. We really like you, but if you don't get the job, then just wanted to let you know that we're grateful and all of that. But of course, they offered me a job, and I started working with them. So, and I worked for the certification again branch for a couple of years, and did reviews of organic system plans, as Rebecca was explaining what those are. Did organic inspections. Really got the experience, direct experience of navigating organic certification, understanding the regulation. But I've always been very sort of passionate and love working directly with farmers and teaching and doing the kinds of things that I do today. So that, in a way, has sort of been my journey. It was sort of, something that I think happened. I wasn't really planning for at the time. Of course, now, yeah, and you mentioned, Mary, with our SE TOP, the Southeast Transition to Organic Partnership Program, it really has become part of the mission that FOG has, and mine as well, is helping people who are interested in organic farming and answering questions and helping as much as we can, not just farmers, but often also service providers. We had a grant years ago, another SARE grant, which was called what service providers need to know about your national organic standards. So, helping them understand, service providers and extension agents, what organic certification was all about. So
wonderful. Thanks. I'm gonna start this first question off to you, Eva. I would love to hear a little more about your experience working with technical service providers and extension, and how you feel that they can better support growers in their efforts, and to learn more about like the certification process.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, I would say that more and more service providers and extension personnel are understanding organic, and obviously everyone who's on this webinar has an interest in it. I think that historically it has not been as much a priority administratively, and the staff allocation is very limited. There could be a great deal more. So those who do have the opportunity to serve organic farmers really can think of themselves as torchbearers or ambassadors to other people within their own organization where there's room for it. Just that if they feel overwhelmed, they can communicate that. I often do hear from USDA staff or sometimes from extension staff in different states that they wish that they could do more, but that they are limited. And while it's hard enough just to do your job, you don't also want to have to explain all around it. Just a few simple, well-placed statements can make a big difference, and making requests for support would be very helpful. So aside from that, I would say in terms of actually helping farms on the ground, really they can help with understanding and letting farmers understand what resources are available within the extension or service provider organization, and then what is not available. Like, what are the boundaries currently? And have it be a two-way type of interaction where understanding what their needs are and whether it can be something that the organization grows to cover could be very helpful. You know, there are many entities involved with getting a farm certified, and you know, obviously it starts with the farmer and their desire to do it. And then maybe they reach out to the support personnel and they say, well, how can you help me? Well, they really can't help them do everything. They can help with certain things. The planning may be part of what they could help with. The record keeping, giving them some of the types of things that they have seen work with other farms that are similar. And then the practices, the recommendations for things like tractor cultivation, or you know, if their appointment is more in the space of pest management or nutrient management. You know, each person comes to the role as an extension agent or technical service provider with their own background and then their own job appointment. You know, you can only do what you can do. But I would say that doing the best that you can, being two-way about it, and thinking of it as a growing process for everyone is really the best approach. Just being flexible and trying to meet their needs. It's the actual technical things, there's a lot to learn, and I would urge people not to become overwhelmed by it, because it is something that even if you learn it all, then it changes, because it's not something that the organic standards are not static. They are evolving constantly with new information. And while it does have a general ethos and there are statutes that guide it, the actual state of the science does change over time. What's allowed and not allowed is part of it, but also things that we learn about, you know, crop rotations, or ways that we can integrate artificial intelligence with the management of both hardware and software applications to the farm. So, you know, just try to meet the needs and let the farmers know what your needs and boundaries are in terms of the role, but just stay committed to it.
Wow, Eva, what a wonderful and thoughtful response to that question. And you can just tell how many years of experience you've had working with people. That's incredible. And I guess I want to kind of turn that question a little bit and ask Danielle and Juan Carlos, maybe how you work with your farmers on kind of this certification question, how you kind of frame some of these things, and maybe suggestions on where service providers and extension can seek answers to help with these organic farmer questions. Kind of what are the resources for the people trying to give the resources, I guess.
Carlos, you want to go first, or
I can go first.
Good.
Yeah, sure, I can go first.
For it.
And it's interesting. I just right before this webinar, I was at another webinar with some new farmers in Mississippi, Louisiana, and those states are, you know, that's part of the SCTOP, the Southeast Transition to Organic Partnership Program. And compared to Florida, where we have over 400 operations, that means, and Rebecca explained it really well, crops, livestock, handlers and processors, it's over 400, about 145 last time I checked the organic integrity of farms. But those states are behind. And so we're trying now to sometimes, at least for FOG, promote organic farming. And then the farmers will ask, but why should I go organic? You know, what's in it? Is it really, am I going to get that premium price? I think some of those questions are important. If I were to talk to service providers, an extension sometimes, and directly to those farmers, is how do I answer that question sometimes? Because as Eva was also saying, you can't possibly be able to provide or think that you're going to have answers to all of those questions. I think that the first thing that I always try to do is really, really listen to those farmers. what is, what are some of their goals in terms of why are they considering organic? They heard this about organic. Rebecca also, again, in my experience, explained it in a way that I sometimes use. There's a lot of ideas, myths sometimes about organic, what organic is, but sometimes what organic isn't. Oh, you can't use pesticides. You hear that a lot. We know that that's not necessarily the case. I've been using this example since I heard it last year that someone, a service provider in Alabama, who for whatever reason didn't think organic really, worked, told a farmer that they could only use hand tools. And so, oh no, you can't use tractors, you can't use that. And this was somebody who apparently was knowledgeable enough about, organic systems. Not, I mean, I'm talking agricultural systems and all that, but I heard organic, you can only use hand tools. And the farmer asked me in that workshop, is that true? And I again, sometimes never say, oh, that person didn't know what they were talking about. Maybe that person is confused, I say. Or maybe that person wasn't really sure when they told you that indeed you can use equipment, share equipment. Rebecca explained it also, but you need to properly clean, document, record keeping, and all those things. The record keeping piece is one that confuses me sometimes. And when I'm trying, in the sense that there are multiple ways that you can keep records. There's not one right way to keep records. So that's another thing that with farmers, there is not one way to do a lot of what we're doing. And the compliance piece, always check with your certifier. If you're in that process of, and I think Rebecca also mentioned it, the process of either seeking the certification or ready to start getting certified, or don't even know if something's allowed or prohibited, well, that's where the extension agents and the service providers and FOG and Danielle and Eva, we come in and try to help. We can't possibly know all the answers to all the questions, as we've been saying. And it's okay to sometimes know the answers, not know the answers to many of these things. So my approach is always first listen, really try to understand as much as possible where that particular farmer is coming from, what are the goals, what is it he or she thinks that they know about organic and have heard, instead of maybe start from there. I think that one of the other things, even though I've never owned a farm, but to me, it's very, very important because, again, I've been around a lot of really good farmers like Eva, and I was telling you about the farm that I used to work with. It is a business, and it needs to be managed as a business. So you need to have goals. You need to know exactly why you're going to grow this particular crop, why you want to obviously do it organically, and maybe just start from there. I think the dialogue, for me at least, is listening, again, once again, extremely important as you're trying to help and answer questions, of course.
Thank you,
Good.
JC.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Juan Carlos. I'll add a few things, new things, as I'm a scientist, an educator first. So the first thing that we tell all of the farmers that we work with, if they're conventional or organic or somewhere in between, is sell it before you plant it. You really need to have a market in place before you get started producing anything on a farm. And people ask me, well, what are the opportunities in organic? And so I say, well, they're the same as conventional, except there's a few more. There's a few more. There's a lot of interest in nutritional quality all the way around, right? And part of this is fueled by the administrative interest that we have right now, the MAHA movement. But this movement has been building for a while, right? And it's had different names over the years, but basically people like to be healthy and they want to eat right. So at the bare bones of the whole thing is just eat good food, eat fresh food, right? I think that consumers have the perspective that, organic is more nutritious, organic is pesticide free. Some of these are true in some cases, some of these are not true. Right. And so I help the technical service providers and the farmers understand the consumers, because they're the ones that are in direct contact with these folks too. And it's really important that we have a uniform message across our whole industry. Like, okay, look, folks, that's fine. Let's make a correction there. The most enthusiastic, I think, rationale that I can offer for organic is that it has real social and economic and environmental value. And organic was the first regenerative, and it's the first whatever. There's going to be another word that's going to come in after regenerative, and it's going to mean something like regenerative, but it's going to be a new word, because it was alternative agriculture, then sustainable agriculture, and then, So there's a lot of words for this stuff. But basically, listen, we're farming with nature here. We're using the ecological systems and the biological systems to their fullest capacity, and that is the mission of these systems. And as a scientist, it is vastly interesting. I work with split operators, farmers that have both conventional and organic. And it is fascinating what they say. I had a farmer who sat down and explained to me how what he learned in the small little organic section of his farm informed the 75% of the other hundreds of acres that he had on his conventional farm, because he learned things that were working, that were going to save him money, time, labor. And farmers don't like to apply pesticides. They just don't. They don't. They understand the risks to their own health, and they see what it does. But the bottom line, as Juan Carlos said, is a business, and they've got to stay ahead, and they've got to make a profit, or they're going to lose the land to development, which is what happens in Florida. So split operators are really fun to work with. So if you have those folks that you're assisting, take advantage of that. You are both going to learn an awful lot if you're helping that farmer transition into organic. And anyway, one more, just really, well, actually two more points. So opportunities about health. Food as medicine is another area of interest. Quite frankly, I can't understand how crops can be produced for their nutraceutical properties in conventional systems as well as they can be produced in organic systems. It's the natural stresses that occur in these biologically and ecologically based systems that induce stresses upon the plant, which cause them to make metabolites. And the short answer is those metabolites are the things that we are interested in consuming. They're minerals, vitamins, what have you. That's plant physiology. That's basic plant physiology. And so I think that's really cool. I think there's a big opportunity there for our growers. And then you can also look at import-export data. And we are still importing a plenty ton of organic food, grains, tropical fruit. Those are opportunities to produce those commodities here in the U.S. With apologies to our folks that are joining us from other countries. We're glad you're here. But it probably works both ways. So if you are joining from another country, you can look at that same data and use it to your advantage. And the last point that I want to make that I really emphasize, probably more to my, the agents I work with and to technical service providers, is that in extension, we are not the regulators. And I'm responsible for submitting and sort of managing the organic system plan for one of my research stations. So I have the full load of paperwork as a farmer. And it's, I learn something new every year. But when I go on a farm, I am not the regulator. I am there to listen and learn and help. I do not interpret the law. I can share practices that work, generally speaking. At the end of the day, it's that farmer's responsibility to integrate that into their system plan and get approval from their certifier before implementing, of course.
Wow, wonderful. You touched on it, and as well, you as well, Juan Carlos, and our participant, Richard, also has mentioned the use of just pesticides and just pest management in organics. And I just, not for any of us to be nozzle heads, but I would love for you all to touch on kind of your approach to using inputs, right? Especially for pest and disease management and these organic systems. Eva, if you'd like, I'd love to start with you and kind of what your approach is.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. Richard, I was reading your comments in the chat and I feel your pain. It's definitely a challenge in the humid South. Um, what we have had success with is really focusing on cultivar selection, looking for disease tolerance and resistance when possible, and interacting with the seed breeders and seed companies. Just from our side of and the consulting side of things, we have had the privilege of direct communication with a lot of these folks, but these are seeds that eventually become available to everyone. And um, you know as a service provider, helping the farmers to understand how important it is what seeds you choose to begin with. If you're trying to grow something that is very susceptible to diseases, you're kind of you're going to have trouble from the outset, basically. And a lot of people are growing based on consumer requests. That's like asking a kindergarten class what they would like to do today. It's if you're going to be a business, a successful farm business, you have to grow things that will grow well and that will give you a product that you can sell. So, as a service provider, help them get good seeds. I would say that's one big thing. The other thing is, with pests, we've planted thousands of trees as windbreaks, but also for biostrips at the margins of our fields to help with attracting beneficial insects and to provide pollinator space as well. But by nurturing the beneficial population habitat, what happens in a vegetable system is you have the crops and then you don't. And because you till it in and you cycle, right? You rotate. But for those times when you don't, the insects need somewhere to go. And so by having at the field margins places for them to exist in the interim times, that has worked out really well. So we do minimize the use of any insecticides on our farm, and with our clients, we recommend try to encourage the beneficial populations when you can. With regard to soil-borne diseases, we are always, or nematodes, we're always looking at what are the issues or what can we do preventatively in terms of our cover crops and our rotations to help keep it healthy. It's a little bit like the way you try with a human body. You try to have a healthy gut flora. You want to have a healthy soil microbiome. And for those of you who are really into the organic stuff already, this is very familiar territory. If it's the first time you've ever heard that phrase, it might seem a little bit unusual, but there's a lot in soil science and pest management that has already been published that basically translates into specific practices for specific crops that can be applied and you can be successful using. So we try to use those and we recommend them. And yeah, it's there. Each crop has its own set of pest complexes. And so just being aware of um, what the what the issues could be, and that does come with experience, and sometimes hard won. But once once you know what the challenges are, then you can do your best to prevent them using cultural methods as well as the seed selection and also timing. when you're planting, and really trying to get the production window where the climate is most agreeable. So sometimes that matches up with the market window and sometimes it doesn't. So then there's kind of a decision process that you go through. Like it, sure, I can grow this now, but does anybody really want this now? And like Dr. Treadwell said, you definitely want to have that crop as sold as possible before it's ever planted. That's really important, especially with the fresh market products, which much of it is in the South in organics.
Juan Carlos or Danielle, would you like to add anything to that, to your approach to investment? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I can add. Eva just summarized it so well, and really, I mean, she touched on all of it. The selection of the crops, the varieties, the seeds, the crop rotations, all of these practices. One thing that I do maybe, and just to sort of summarize if I can, is it's not input replacement. It's not, it's a holistic approach. Danielle also was kind of alluding to it. It's instead of farming with nature, site is going to be very specific. There's going to be differences, especially in a state like ours in Florida, long state. It's one thing to be farming in Homestead or, around Punta Gorda, where Eva is located, up here in Gainesville, where we're located, the Panhandle, very different. You have to know the site, you have to know the locations, you have to understand that environment, timing, practices. Again, Eva just explained it really well. That is the one thing that I say, it's not input replacement, because some people have told me, just tell me what I need to do, tell me what I can use, including what are some of the pesticides, and talking about pests, that I can use or allow. And so, well, hold on. Rebecca said it. It is the last line of defense. You have to use all these preventive and cultural practices before you can even think about applying something. And so those are some of the things that I emphasize a lot when people are sort of asking these questions. What can I do? Again, what are your problems? Extension, Dr. Treadwell obviously is there, and they are great at providing sort of these recommendations sometimes, or just basically helping either the fellow extension agents and service providers with some of these things, and ultimately, as I said it once, but I think I want to repeat it again, is that Danielle also said it. They don't make the rules. You need to be talking to the people who are interpreting the regulations, and the certifiers. Us here at FOG often do that job, but we also are not, certifying farms. But we're always here to try to, based in some, the experience that we have, to clarify things when it comes to the regulations, what's allowed, what's prohibited. And unlike the certifier, which is another thing that perhaps for some of the extension and service providers out there that maybe haven't had the opportunity yet or interact with them, certifiers cannot give recommendations. They can only answer questions about what's allowed and what's prohibited. It is all of us, other folks, that can, when we do have those tools, give those recommendations and try to help and give suggestions. So yeah, it takes a team really to address many of these problems, but that's what I would say when it comes to, it's not input replacement. You have to really keep that in mind. It's a very holistic approach to farming.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. I'll add maybe 2 points. The organic system plan for pest management, in our experience, it has helped me to justify my case for managing certain crops if I provide my certification agency and my inspector with plenty of evidence, right? And so sometimes there's a pest on the farm that they may be unfamiliar with. And so I share information about this pest life cycle. If you have sclerotinia, guess what? you have sclerotinia for a really, really long time, right? And so that's a conversation you need to have with your certification agency. You know, do I need to stop growing tomatoes or whatever crop it is? Or is there an alternative approach where I, you know, can use some sprays in addition to all of the other cultural practices and sanitary practices that I've laid out, right? So you check as many boxes as you can, and at some point it gets a little rude, and you know you just got to put the hammer down. And you know, even if they're compliant products, none of us like to use them. Number one, they're super expensive, and number two, as you state, Richard, in your point, these are not preventative. They are not effective at preventing disease. All they can do is slow down the progression of disease. That is because they're biologicals. Okay, they're just not designed to kill things. That's that's the other side of the fence. um, we did have some issues with alternaria one year drifting into our carrots, and we got some pushback from our agency. Oh, well, you can't spray yet, and I'm like, it's in the next field. And so the right information wasn't coming out. And so finally, over the course of the conversation, they became aware that the next field for me was like 20 feet away because I'm on a research station. I'm like, no, it's literally the next field. And so, you know, if you're on a farm and you've got alternaria and a crop that is just on the other side of the tractor road, then yes, it's okay. We're going to expect that alternaria to show up in your crop if it's susceptible like any second, right? And so then over the course of that conversation, you know, we were approved to begin using products. There is another lurking variable with some of these products, and that's copper accumulation. So many of these are, copper is a terrific fungicide, and it's present in many, many products, and it will accumulate in your soil. So that is a really good question to ask your farmers that you work with. You know, just keep in mind that that's really important. Growers are expected to submit soil samples every 3 years or more frequently if requested, to demonstrate that their copper levels are not increasing as a result of their management. So that's not to say that, you know, if you start with a soil that's really high in copper, you're going to get busted for it. It's what you do as evidence that copper is increasing. That's what they're looking for. And yeah, so I just want to make this once.
Wow, that was wonderful. I cannot believe we are already at our time here. I am going to hold up this this last placard. This you can scan. You can have continuing education units. It's 1 professional development credit if you want to scan that. And I just want to thank our panelists. Like, what a wealth of knowledge you've shared here. We really appreciate you being here and just sharing your experience, your expertise with everyone.